The unexpected war. The sky over Velari Prime was calm. The twin moons glowed softly, casting silver light over the grand city of Senkar. The marketplace was full of life. Aliens of all shapes and sizes bartered, laughed, and argued over strange goods. Ethan, a human explorer, walked through the crowded streets. He had seen many alien worlds, but this one was special. Velari Prime was home to the Velari, a proud and mysterious feline-like species. Their golden eyes and long, elegant tails made them look both graceful and dangerous. Ethan adjusted the strap of his backpack and glanced around. He was here for trade, not trouble. But deep inside, he knew that humans were not fully trusted on this planet. And then, it happened. A sudden push from the crowd sent Ethan stumbling forward. He reached out instinctively to steady himself. His fingers brushed against something soft and smooth. A Velari tail. The entire market froze. For a moment, there was complete silence. Ethan looked up and saw a female Velari standing in front of him. Her golden eyes were wide, her ears pressed back. Her tail twitched as if it had been struck by lightning. "You touched my tail." Her voice was sharp, filled with shock and something else. Anger. Ethan quickly pulled back his hand. I didn't mean to." Before he could finish, loud shouts filled the air. The crowd moved back as heavily armed Velari guards stepped forward, weapons raised. "Human, you have committed a grave offense," one of the guards barked. Ethan's heart pounded. What had he done? The female Velari, still staring at him, finally spoke. "Do you even understand what you have done?" Ethan swallowed. "I don't. But I think I'm in trouble." The guards surrounded him. One of them, a tall warrior with silver markings on his fur, stepped forward. "In our culture, touching a Velari's tail is a sacred act. Only those with the deepest trust, or an unbreakable bond, may do so." His voice was low, dangerous. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This was bad, really bad. The marketplace was now completely silent, everyone watching. The Velari woman's tail twitched again. She should have attacked him. She should have demanded his execution. But she didn't. The silver-marked guard turned to her. "Lady Syria, what is your command?" Syria hesitated. She was one of the highest-ranking warriors in the Velari Empire. The law was clear. If an outsider touched a Velari's tail without permission, it was considered an unforgivable insult. But something felt different. She looked at the human. He didn't seem like an enemy. His eyes were confused, not mocking. His hands trembled slightly. He was scared, not arrogant. Syria took a deep breath. "Take him to the council." The guards hesitated. "But, Lady Syria." "That is my order." Her voice was firm. "I will explain myself there." Ethan didn't resist as the guards grabbed his arms. He knew one thing. He needed to get off this planet. Fast. The council chamber. The grand hall of the Velari High Council was massive. Golden banners hung from the tall walls. Glowing crystals provided soft light. And at the center sat the Velari elders, the wisest and most powerful rulers of the empire. Ethan stood in the middle of the chamber, his hands tied. Syria stood beside him, her tail flicking nervously. The oldest elder, his fur almost completely white, leaned forward. His voice was deep and heavy. "A human, touching a Velari tail. This is not a small mistake." Ethan sighed. "Look, it was an accident. I didn't mean any disrespect." The council members murmured among themselves. Then one of them said, "And yet, Lady Syria did not strike you down. That is unusual." Syria stiffened. She couldn't explain it herself. Why had she stopped the guards? Why had she defended this human? Another elder leaned forward. "The bond has been triggered, hasn't it?" A tense silence filled the room. Ethan frowned. "What bond?" Syria looked away. She didn't want to answer. One of the elders did. When a Velari allows a stranger to touch their tail without punishment, it means their fate is now tied together. Ethan blinked. Wait, you're telling me that because she didn't attack me, I'm stuck with her? Yes, the elder nodded. Your fates are now intertwined. If one of you dies, the other will suffer. If one of you is in danger, the other will feel it. Ethan stared at Syria. This is a joke, right? She met his gaze, her golden eyes troubled. I wish it were. A new voice interrupted. It was a guard who had just entered the chamber, breathing hard. My lords, an enemy fleet has entered our space. They are attacking our defenses. The room erupted into chaos. Syria clenched her fists. A war. Now, the oldest elder's eyes darkened. This cannot be a coincidence. Ethan felt a cold shiver. He had come here for trade. Now he was part of an ancient bond, and in the middle of a war he didn't understand. Syria turned to him. Looks like you're not leaving anytime soon, human. Ethan sighed. This day just kept getting worse. The ancient bond. The sound of alarms echoed through the grand halls of the Velari High Council. Golden banners fluttered as a cold wind rushed in from the open balcony, carrying the distant roar of explosions. The sky outside was no longer calm. It was burning. Ethan could see it through the massive crystal windows of the chamber. Bright streaks of energy fire lit up the dark sky, and Velari defense ships were scrambling to engage an unidentified enemy fleet. He turned to Syria, whose golden eyes reflected the growing chaos outside. Her ears were pressed back, her tail twitching in distress. What the hell is going on? Ethan asked, his voice tense. Syria's hands clenched into fists. We're under attack. No kidding. Ethan's pulse quickened. By who? One of the elders, the oldest among them, stood from his ornate chair. His fur was almost silver with age, his long robes trailing behind him as he stepped forward. This attack, it is not a coincidence. His voice was deep, slow, and heavy with unspoken knowledge. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? The elder's golden eyes locked onto Ethan's. A human arrives, breaks a sacred Velari tradition, and moments later, our enemies strike. No, this is not an accident. Ethan's stomach dropped. Wait, you think I planned this? Syria's tail flicked as she studied Ethan's face. Something inside her said he wasn't lying. But the elder wasn't finished. You carry something within you, human. Something we do not understand. His voice was grave. The moment you touched Lady Syria's tail, you triggered the bond. And now, war has come to our doorstep. Ethan shook his head. That doesn't make sense. I didn't do anything. A massive shockwave rocked the chamber. The windows cracked as another explosion erupted outside. The guards tensed, their weapons drawn. A younger elder, her fur jet black, spoke up. We must evacuate the council to the underground shelters. But the eldest elder shook his head. No, this is not a battle we can run from. This is something greater. His gaze shifted to Syria. And she knows it. Syria stiffened. Elder, you felt it, didn't you? The elder's piercing gaze locked onto her. When the human touched your tail, you felt the bond awaken. A long silence stretched between them. Ethan's heart pounded. What does that mean? Syria hesitated, then finally spoke, her voice quieter than before. The bond is not just tradition. It is biological. It is ancient. She turned to Ethan, her golden eyes unreadable. It means our fates are now connected, human. Ethan swallowed hard. Okay. And what does that mean for me? The elder's voice was like thunder. It means if one of you dies, so does the other. The enemy revealed. The weight of the words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He felt lightheaded. What? He whispered. The bond is a forgotten part of Velari history, the elder continued. It was once a powerful force, uniting warriors. But it was lost to time. And now it has awakened, with a human. Ethan's mind raced. He hadn't even known the Velari existed a year ago. And now he was magically linked to one of them. This had to be some kind of mistake. Syria exhaled sharply. I don't have time to argue about fate. She turned to the guards. Prepare the fleet. We need to push back the attackers before they reach the city center. Ethan's thoughts were still spinning, but the urgency of the situation forced him to focus. Who are they? He asked again. Who's attacking? A guard stepped forward. The Dralzur Dominion. Ethan frowned. He had heard that name before. A warlike species, insectoid in appearance, known for their ruthless conquests. But they weren't supposed to be anywhere near Velari space. Syria's tail flicked sharply. They must have found something. Something important. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Or someone. The connection was too convenient. He shows up, touches Syria's tail, and immediately after, an enemy fleet arrives. It wasn't just an attack. They had been waiting for something. Or someone. Syria seemed to come to the same realization. She turned to the elder. I need to take a squad to the front lines. The elder nodded gravely. Go, and take the human. Syria's ears twitched in irritation. What? He's an outsider. He is bound to you now, the elder said. Whether you like it or not, your destinies are intertwined. Syria shot Ethan a sharp look. Stay out of my way. Ethan sighed. Yeah, sure. Just another day in space. No big deal. Battle in the sky. Minutes later, Ethan found himself aboard a Velari warship, standing beside Syria as the vessel soared into battle. Outside the ship's viewport, chaos raged. Velari defense fighters weaved between burning wreckage, engaging the Dralzur swarm in high-speed dogfights. Syria sat in the command seat, issuing orders to her fleet. Focus fire on their lead dreadnought. If we break their formation, they'll fall back. Ethan, standing nearby, felt helpless. He was no pilot, no soldier. He was just an explorer who had gotten in way over his head. A sudden explosion rocked the ship. The alarms blared. Shields at 42%. A Velari officer called out. Syria's grip on the control panel tightened. Hold position. Target their engines. Ethan glanced at her. Despite the battle raging around them, she was calm, focused, fierce. Then, a warning flashed on the screen. A Dralzur boarding pod was heading straight for them. Ethan's stomach twisted. Syria. She saw it too. They're trying to board us. The ship's AI confirmed it. Impact in 20 seconds. Ethan reached for a weapon, his heart pounding. He wasn't a soldier, but if these insectoid warriors were coming aboard, he wasn't about to go down without a fight. Syria stood beside him, gripping her blade. This is where the real battle begins. The enemy within. The ship shook violently, throwing Ethan off balance. He crashed into the cold metal walls, gripping onto a railing as the warning alarm screamed in his ears. The Dralzur boarding pod had just latched onto their hull. Syria stood firm, her golden eyes locked on the display screen. A red blinking dot indicated the breach point. Cargo Bay 3. They're inside, Syria said, voice sharp with urgency. We have to move. Ethan picked himself up. His heart was pounding, but his instincts screamed at him to stay alive. Yeah, sure. Just run straight into the creepy bug aliens. Love that plan, he muttered. Syria ignored him and tapped her wrist communicator. All squads, converge on Cargo Bay 3. No mercy. A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine at those last words. No mercy. Velari warriors were not known for their kindness in battle. Ethan took a deep breath, tightening his grip on the pulse rifle he had grabbed from the armory. He wasn't a soldier, but if he wanted to make it out of this alive, he'd have to act like one. Syria moved like a predator, her long tail swaying behind her as she led the way through the tight corridors. The air was thick with tension, the only sounds being the hum of the ship's engines and the distant clanking of metal. The Dralzur were inside. Ethan knew the Dralzur from old reports. Six-legged, armored exoskeletons, razor-sharp mandibles, and no concept of fear. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't negotiate. They consumed everything in their path. And now, they were here. The first contact. The doors to Cargo Bay 3 slid open. Inside, the metal walls were scarred with deep claw marks, and strange, chittering sounds echoed through the chamber. Then, movement. Ethan's eyes widened as something massive dropped from the ceiling. A Drelzer warrior, twice his height, landed with a sickening thud. Its chitinous body gleamed under the ship's lights, its 8 black eyes locking onto them with predatory hunger. Syria didn't hesitate. She moved first. With a fierce snarl, she lunged forward, her energy blade igniting in a flash of blue. The Drelzer let out a piercing shriek, its serrated limbs swinging toward her like deadly scythes. Ethan barely had time to react before another Drelzer dropped from above, lunging straight at him. He dove out of the way just in time, rolling behind a cargo container. His pulse rifle shook in his hands. "Okay, Ethan," he muttered to himself. "No big deal. Just a giant, man-eating space bug. No pressure." The Drelzer charged. Ethan fired. A burst of blue energy shot from his rifle, striking the creature's armored chest, but the blast only scorched its exoskeleton. The thing hissed in irritation, unfazed. "Oh, come on," Ethan groaned. The Drelzer lunged again. Ethan barely managed to roll aside as its razor-sharp limbs slashed the ground where he had been standing seconds ago. Syria, meanwhile, was locked in combat with the first warrior. She was fast, dodging, weaving, her blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. But the Drelzer was strong. One well-timed strike from its clawed limb sent her skidding backward. Ethan cursed. They were outnumbered. Then, a new sound. A deep guttural growl echoed from the shadows. Ethan turned, and his blood ran cold. More of them. At least 6 more Drelzer crawled from the ventilation shafts, their twisted mandibles clicking in unison. Their black, soulless eyes glowed with hunger. They hadn't come just to fight. They had come to devour. The bond awakens. Something in Ethan snapped. Maybe it was the fear. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Or maybe it was something else. A sudden heat burned in his chest, a strange pulse that wasn't his own. It felt ancient, primal, like something awakening deep inside him. And then he felt her. Syria. Not just standing beside him. Not just fighting. He could feel her presence, her pulse, her heartbeat, as if their minds had somehow linked. Syria's eyes widened slightly. She had felt it too. The bond had awakened. Ethan didn't have time to question it. His body moved on its own. As the nearest Drelzer lunged, he ducked, but not randomly. He moved exactly as Syria would have moved, his instincts aligning with hers in perfect sync. Without thinking, he spun his rifle like a staff, striking the creature across its mandibles. It staggered back, stunned. Syria saw it happen. She understood immediately. "The bond," she murmured. Ethan didn't hear her. He was already moving, his mind racing with a new clarity. The Drelzer attacked as a pack. If they didn't break formation, they were done for. "Syria," Ethan shouted. "Go high. I'll go low." She didn't question him. She just moved. As the creatures swarmed, Syria leaped, flipping over their heads with feline grace. Ethan, at the same moment, slid low, firing up at their underbellies, where their armor was thinnest. 2 Drelzer shrieked as Ethan's shots pierced through their exoskeletons. Syria, landing behind them, drove her blade through another's skull. The creatures faltered. The Velari soldiers rushed in, cutting down the remaining enemies. Within minutes, the Drelzer were dead, their corpses littering the cargo bay floor. The battle was over. But Ethan was breathing hard, his hands trembling. Because in that moment, he hadn't just fought like himself. He had fought like her. The truth unveiled. Syria slowly turned to Ethan. You felt it, didn't you? She asked. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. I don't know what that was. But yeah, I felt something. Syria's tail flicked. The bond is strengthening. Ethan looked at her. So what does that mean for me? Syria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer. Her golden eyes studied him, not as a human, not as an outsider, but as something more. Finally, she spoke. It means you're not just linked to me, Ethan. Her voice was quiet, but heavy with meaning. You're becoming one of us. Ethan's breath caught. Syria turned away. And if that's true, then you are in far greater danger than you realize. Before Ethan could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. All units, report. The Dralzer flagship is moving into position. They're preparing to wipe us out. Ethan's stomach dropped. The battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. The transformation begins. The ship trembled under the weight of incoming fire. Outside the Velari warship's reinforced windows, the Dralzer flagship loomed like a monstrous, living fortress. Its jagged organic hull pulsed with a sickly green glow, and hundreds of smaller attack vessels swarmed around it like a hive of angry wasps. Ethan tightened his grip on his pulse rifle. He wasn't a soldier. He was just an explorer, a trader, a guy who'd gotten way too deep into something he didn't understand. But something inside him had changed. The battle in the cargo bay had proven that much. He could still feel it, the bond. Syria stood beside him, her golden eyes locked onto the holographic display of the battlefield. Her expression was unreadable, but Ethan knew she was thinking the same thing. Whatever was happening between them, it wasn't natural. The Velari elders had called it an ancient force, something lost to time. But Ethan wasn't Velari. He was human. So why was he changing? Syria finally turned to him. You need to tell me the truth. Ethan frowned. About what? She stepped closer, her tail flicking sharply behind her. You fought like a Velari warrior back there. That's not something humans do. Your reflexes, your movements, they weren't yours. Ethan hesitated. I don't know how to explain it. It just happened. Syria studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached for her wrist device and tapped a few buttons. A blue holographic interface flickered to life, scanning Ethan's body. A few seconds later, Syria's eyes widened in shock. This is impossible. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. What? What is it? Syria's tail twitched. Your DNA. It's changing. Ethan took a step back. That's not possible. Syria exhaled sharply. That's what I thought too. But the bond, it's not just some mystical connection. It's biological. She pointed at the holographic scan. Your nervous system is adapting. Your muscle response time is tripled. And she hesitated, her golden eyes narrowing. Ethan swallowed. And what? Syria met his gaze. Your brain waves. They're syncing with mine. A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. What the hell does that mean? It means that soon, you may not just fight like a Velari. Syria's voice was quiet, almost reluctant. You might become one. The Dralzer's final move. Before Ethan could process what she had just said, the ship's alarms blared again. Incoming transmission, the ship's AI announced. Syria clenched her jaw. Put it through. The holographic display in front of them flickered. And then, a nightmare appeared. The Dralzer warlord. Its towering insectoid form stood within a dark, pulsating chamber, the air around it thick with green mist. Its exoskeleton was scarred from countless battles, and its glowing red eyes locked onto them like a predator sizing up its next meal. A deep, guttural voice rumbled through the speakers. Velari, your time has come. Syria narrowed her eyes. You're trespassing in our space, warlord Exol Kran. Leave, or be destroyed. The warlord chuckled, a sickening, buzzing sound. Your people are weak. You hide behind traditions and outdated laws. But now, you will kneel. Ethan could feel the raw hatred in the creature's voice. Syria's tail flicked in irritation. We've beaten you before. We'll do it again. Zolkran let out a sharp, piercing screech that made Ethan's skull ache. No, the warlord hissed. Not this time. The holographic image shifted, revealing something behind the warlord. A massive, pulsating structure, glowing with eerie green energy. Syria's ears flattened in horror. That's... Ethan frowned. What is that? Syria's voice was cold. A planet killer bomb. Ethan's stomach dropped. Wait, you're saying... They mean to wipe out Velari Prime. Zolkran clicked his mandibles in twisted satisfaction. Your empire ends today. The transmission cut off. Silence filled the command deck. Syria turned to her officers. Get me the fleet admiral. Now. The officers scrambled to obey. Ethan took a deep breath, his hands shaking. A planet killer bomb. That was insanity. We have to stop them, he said. Syria shot him a sharp look. I know. Ethan hesitated. I need to help. Syria's ears flicked in irritation. You're a human. This isn't your fight. Ethan stepped closer, voice firm. It is now. He met her gaze. Like it or not, I'm part of this. And if that bond thing is real, if I'm really changing, then maybe I can use it to help. Syria was silent for a moment. Then finally she nodded. Fine. But if you slow me down, I'll kill you myself. Ethan smirked. Noted. Syria turned to her officers. Prepare a strike team. We're boarding that flagship. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Boarding? Syria flicked her tail. We're taking the fight to them. The final battle begins. 15 minutes later, Ethan stood inside a Velari drop pod, surrounded by armored warriors. Through the small viewport, he could see the Dralzur flagship looming ahead. Its hull pulsed with dark energy. Its spiked structure almost organic, as if the ship itself was alive. Syria stood beside him, her energy blade humming softly in her grip. Ethan exhaled slowly. So, we're just gonna fly straight in. Syria smirked slightly. You wanted to help. This is how you help. The ship's AI counted down. 3, 2, 1. Launch. The drop pod exploded forward, cutting through the battlefield, dodging laser fire as it barreled straight toward the enemy flagship. Ethan gripped his seat as the pod shook violently. This is insane. Syria gave him a sharp grin. Welcome to war. The pod smashed into the flagship's hull, piercing through its outer layer. The doors blasted open, and waiting for them, dozens of Dralzur warriors, their mandibles dripping with venom, their claws twitching in anticipation. Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle. Syria stepped forward, her golden eyes glowing with battle fury. Then she whispered, "No mercy." And they charged. The heart of the hive. The air inside the Dralzur flagship was thick with heat and death. The moment the Velari drop pod smashed through the hull, the warriors poured out, weapons blazing. Ethan barely had time to register what was happening before the battle exploded around him. Syria was already moving, her energy blade flashing like a bolt of lightning. She cut down the first Dralzur warrior in one clean strike, her movements fluid and precise. Ethan, gripping his pulse rifle, dove behind cover as laser fire rained down from the enemy forces. Keep moving. Syria barked, dodging a massive clawed limb that smashed into the floor where she had just been standing. Ethan popped up from cover and fired, his shot hitting one of the Dralzur directly in the chest. The insectoid creature shrieked, but didn't fall. It just kept coming. Syria twisted midair, her tail whipping around as she used it for balance. Her blade sliced through another enemy, severing its head in a single strike. Ethan swallowed hard. I'm starting to think you enjoy this. Syria grinned, her golden eyes glowing in the dim red light. Try to keep up, human. The Drelzer warriors weren't just attacking mindlessly. They were coordinated, moving like a hive, flowing through the corridors in perfect unison. And there were too many of them. One of the Velari soldiers, a lieutenant, shouted, "We need to push forward. The control chamber is ahead." Syria gave a sharp nod. "Move." Ethan stuck close to her as they advanced down the narrow corridors, fighting through wave after wave of Drelzer drones. Every step was harder. Every moment felt like an eternity. And then the world shifted. A sudden pulse of energy shot through Ethan's body, like a surge of electricity through his veins. He stumbled, his vision going white for half a second. Syria turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "Ethan." Ethan gasped, gripping his chest. His heartbeat was pounding, his muscles burning. Then, his senses sharpened. The sounds of the battle became clearer. Every movement in the room became slower, like his body was processing time differently. Syria's voice sounded distant, like she was speaking through water. "Ethan, what's happening?" Ethan didn't know. But suddenly, he could feel everything. The Drelzer warriors weren't mindless insects. They had a rhythm, a pattern, a way of moving that was predictable. His instincts reacted before his brain could think. A Drelzer lunged at him from the shadows. Ethan spun to the side, faster than he should have been able to, dodging the attack with unnatural precision. His rifle came up on its own. He fired twice, each shot hitting exactly where it needed to. The Drelzer collapsed, dead. Syria's tail flicked sharply. She saw it. Ethan had just moved like a Velari. He was becoming one. The hive minds whisper. They reached a massive doorway, reinforced with black, organic-looking metal. Syria placed a hand on a control panel, scanning it quickly. "This is it. The bomb's control chamber is inside." Ethan exhaled. "Great. So, how do we?" Vam. The doors slammed open on their own. A thick, green mist spilled out, washing over them in waves. Syria tensed. Something's wrong. Ethan froze. Something whispered in his head. A voice. Faint, strange, alien. Not human. Not Velari. It hissed, low and insidious. "You are not supposed to exist." Ethan's body locked up, his limbs refusing to move. Syria grabbed his arm. "Ethan, stay with me." He couldn't answer, because in that moment, he saw them. Inside the control chamber, attached to the walls, were dozens of Drelzer cocoons, pulsing with green liquid. And in the center, a massive, writhing creature, covered in glowing veins, its black eyes fixed on him. Warlord Solkran. But it wasn't just the warlord. It was something else. Ethan could feel it now. The Drelzer hive mind. It was inside his head, watching him, testing him. And it knew. It knew what was happening to him. The truth of the bond. Syria gritted her teeth, stepping in front of Ethan, her blade raised. "We're shutting this bomb down." Zolkran's mandibles clicked. "No." The warlord took a slow step forward. Ethan felt his pulse slow. The whispering in his mind grew louder. "You're changing." Ethan's hand shook. "Your DNA is not just Velari now." Syria's ears flicked. "What are you talking about?" Zolkran's black eyes locked onto Ethan. "You are something new." Ethan's breath caught. The whispering deepened. The bond between human and Velari was thought to be lost. "But you are the first." Ethan's heart pounded. Syria clenched her fists. He's lying. But was he? Because deep down, Ethan felt it. He was changing. Faster reflexes, sharper senses, his mind linked to Syria's in a way that shouldn't be possible. Zolkran tilted his head. The bond was not a gift. It was a curse. Syria growled, stepping forward. "We're shutting that bomb down. Now." The warlord let out a sharp, buzzing laugh. And then, the walls began to move. The cocoon started splitting open. Drelzer warriors, their eyes glowing with hive energy, emerged from the pods. Ethan's instincts screamed. Syria whispered, "Ethan, get ready." The hive mind whispered back, "You will not leave this place alive." And then, the battle began. The curse of the bond. The air inside the Dralzir hive chamber was thick with the scent of decay and something else. Power. It crackled in the air like static, a low hum that pressed against Ethan's skull. The cocoons along the walls continued to split open, spilling newborn Dralzir warriors onto the floor, their chitinous bodies dripping with green biofluid. Their eyes glowed with the unmistakable light of hive control. Syria's energy blade ignited with a sharp hum. Ethan gripped his pulse rifle, trying to steady his breathing. He could feel something inside him shifting, something that had started ever since he touched Syria's tail. The whispering in his head, the hive mind, was still there, still watching. "You are not Villari." The words slithered through his thoughts like a serpent. "You are not human." His muscles tensed. He knew it was true. The moment he had fought like Syria, moved like her, it had all changed. And now warlord Xul Kran stood before him, watching, studying him. The warlord raised a clawed hand, motioning to his hive-born warriors. "Kill the Villari," he hissed. "Bring the human to me alive." The battle for survival. The Dralzir warriors moved in perfect unison, surging forward like a wave of living blades. Syria lunged first, her blade cutting a glowing arc through the darkness. The first warrior fell instantly, but the others didn't hesitate. Ethan dove to the side, his rifle barking blue energy blasts into the swarm. His shot struck center mass, but these creatures were built for war. They didn't die easily. A massive drone charged at him, mandibles wide, its kitten-plated body shrugging off his fire. It lunged. Ethan's instincts reacted before his mind did. His body twisted, exactly like Syria would have moved. He ducked low, his legs coiling like springs, then leaped backward with unnatural grace. His pulse rifle came up without thought. He fired twice, both shots hitting the soft joints between the creature's exoskeleton. The Dralzir warrior collapsed, dead. Syria's golden eyes flicked to him. She saw it. She saw that his movements were no longer just human. For a moment, her face was unreadable. Then, another Dralzir drone leaped at her. She spun midair, her tail whipping around, using it for balance. Her blade found its mark, cutting straight through its neck. "Ethan," she shouted, "get to the bomb controls." He nodded, sprinting past the chaos as the Villari soldiers fought to hold the swarm back. Xul Kran's voice slithered into his head again. "Do you feel it, human? The gift of the bond." Ethan's vision blurred for half a second. His hands trembled. The bond was getting stronger. He didn't just move like Syria now. He could feel her presence, her thoughts flickering at the edge of his mind. And he could feel something else, a hive mind. Watching, waiting, the truth of the hive. Ethan reached the bomb control panel, his heart hammering. The device was massive, an ancient weapon stolen from another empire, repurposed by the Dralzir for planetary destruction. His fingers hovered over the interface. Then, a sharp pain tore through his skull. His vision flashed white. And suddenly, he wasn't on the ship anymore. He was somewhere else. A dark void, endless and shifting. And standing in front of him was Xul Kran. But not just the warlord. Something bigger, a shadow of the hive mind itself. It towered over him, its form shifting like a living nightmare. Its countless eyes stared into his soul. "You do not belong, human." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Then let me go." The hive mind laughed, a deep, unnatural sound. "You misunderstand." Its eyes glowed brighter. "You are one of us now." Ethan staggered back. "No, I'm not." The hive's voice was everywhere. "Your bond was meant for Villari alone, but your kind, your fragile, weak kind, has broken the cycle. The whispers grew louder. You are not Velari. You are not human. You are something new. Ethan's hands shook. He could feel it, his body shifting, his mind sensing with something ancient, something beyond him. The hive mind leaned closer. You will become the first. A new species, a hybrid of two worlds. The bridge between human and Velari. Ethan's breath hitched. And when you awaken fully, the hive's voice became a whisper. You will belong to me. The final decision. A sudden shockwave snapped Ethan back to reality. Syria was grabbing his arm, shaking him. Ethan, snap out of it. He gasped, blinking hard. The hive's words still echoed in his mind. Syria's golden eyes searched his. What did you see? Ethan hesitated. He could still hear the whispering. But now wasn't the time. We need to disable the bomb, he said, pushing everything else down. Now. Syria nodded and turned to the control panel. How much time do we have? A horrifying answer appeared on the screen. 2:00 minutes until detonation. Ethan's blood went cold. 2 minutes. That was all they had to stop a planet from being wiped out. Syria's hands flew over the controls. I need time to break the security lock. Ethan turned toward the battle raging behind them. The Velari soldiers were outnumbered. They wouldn't last 2 minutes. He gritted his teeth, and then he felt it again. The bond. You are something new. Ethan clenched his fists. He had 2 minutes. No more running. No more doubting. If the hive mind wanted to claim him, it would have to fight for it. He grabbed his rifle, turned toward the battlefield, and whispered, Let's finish this. And then, he charged straight into the swarm. The final awakening. The battlefield was chaos. Ethan charged straight into the swarm, pulse rifle raised, his body moving on pure instinct. He dodged, weaved, twisted, not with human hesitation, but with Velari precision. He was faster now, stronger, and he wasn't sure if that terrified him or thrilled him. A Drelzer warrior lunged, its serrated limbs slashing toward his throat. Ethan ducked low, spun on his heel, and fired point-blank into its underbelly. The creature screeched as it collapsed, its body convulsing in its death throes. Another drone rushed him from behind. Ethan felt it before he saw it. His mind pulsed with a strange awareness, a sixth sense guiding his movements. He turned without thinking, sidestepping the attack at the last second. His elbow came up, hard and fast, striking the creature in the side of its head. Its exoskeleton cracked under the force. Ethan blinked. He hadn't meant to hit it that hard. Something inside him had shifted. Something was waking up. The hive mind's last gambit. Across the chamber, Syria worked frantically at the bomb's control panel. 0:55 CCSONDS until detonation. Her fingers moved fast, bypassing security locks, decrypting the final layers of protection. A hissing voice slithered through the chamber. Cry. The warlord stood above them, his towering form pulsing with sickly green energy. His mandibles clicked, his black eyes narrowing. You think you can stop me? Syria didn't look up. Shut up. The warlord let out a sharp, buzzing laugh. You are too late. The hive cannot be stopped. Syria snarled, her tail flicking in irritation. I hate villains who monologue. Ethan fired at the warlord. Kazolkran dodged unnaturally fast, moving like liquid shadow. His clawed hand shot forward, grabbing Ethan by the throat. The world blurred. Ethan felt something invade his mind. The hive mind. The whispers swelled into a roar. Inside the hive's consciousness, Ethan wasn't in the hive chamber anymore. He was somewhere else. An endless void, stretching in all directions, pulsating with green energy. And in the center, it waited. The true hive mind. Massive, unfathomable. A consciousness older than empires, Its millions of voices spoke at once. You are neither human nor Velari. You are something else. Ethan gritted his teeth. I don't care. The hive laughed. You should, because you belong to us now. Ethan's body burned, like something inside him was changing too fast. He screamed. And then, a golden light cut through the darkness. A familiar voice. Syria. Ethan, get out of there. Her presence was like a beacon, pulling him back to himself. Ethan's eyes snapped open. A hide's grip shattered. He broke free. The death of a warlord. Zolkran staggered back, his hold on Ethan collapsing. Syria's voice snapped through the comms. Ethan, move. Ethan didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, faster than he'd ever moved before. His rifle came up, too slow. So he dropped it, and fought with his hands. His fist slammed into Zolkran's chest, sending the warlord flying backward. The hive energy within him flickered, its control over the warriors weakening. Syria seized the opportunity. She leaped, spinning midair, and drove her blade straight through the warlord's skull. Zolkran let out a final, agonized shriek. Then he fell, dead. And as his body collapsed, the hive forces began to falter. Their connection to the hive mind severed, disarming the bomb. 010 CCONDS until detonation. Syria cursed. Almost there. Ethan, his mind still buzzing with hive knowledge, felt the solution. The Velari were trying to decode the system manually. That wouldn't work. The hive wasn't designed for technology. It was designed for instinct. Ethan placed his hand on the control panel and let the bond guide him. He didn't think. He just moved, fingers flying over the interface, his mind sensing with the alien language of the hive, moving through the code like a second nature. Syria's eyes widened. Ethan, what are you? 03 seconds. Ethan's hand hovered over the final switch. He slammed it down. 00 seconds. The bomb shut down. Silence. Then Syria exhaled sharply. Ethan fell to his knees. His body ached. His mind was still buzzing with whispers that weren't human. Syria knelt beside him. You're not just a human anymore, are you? She said quietly. Ethan swallowed hard. No. Syria studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out, her tail brushing lightly against his arm. A Velari gesture of trust. He looked at her. For the first time, she didn't look at him as an outsider. She looked at him as an equal. Let's go home, she said softly. Ethan nodded. But deep down, he knew. This wasn't over. Because he had become something new. And the universe would never be the same. Epilogue. The first of his kind. Days later, Ethan stood on the Velari Prime balcony, looking up at the twin moons. He could still hear the whispers. The hive wasn't truly gone. It was inside him now. Syria joined him. You should rest. Ethan smirked. You sound worried. Syria crossed her arms. The elders want to see you tomorrow. They think you might be an anomaly. Ethan sighed. Great. I love being the science experiment. Syria's tail flicked in amusement. Get used to it, human. Ethan exhaled, his mind still buzzing with unanswered questions. Who? What was he becoming? The universe had yet to find out. But one thing was certain. This was only the beginning.